And what I keep coming back to, it just says like less is actually more with THC. And I remember learning that so long ago and being like, nah. But that people actually do feel better when they're taking less THC. Lower doses of THC seem to really help with pain perception. But then as you take more THC, it can actually make you feel the pain more, which is not what you want. So THC is unique compared to loads of medications on the market and the way most things kind of work. For many chronic conditions, your endocannabinoid system is actually really dysregulated. And so you're going to need probably more cannabinoids to make a difference there because of how depleted that system is. Since we discovered that we have an endocannabinoid system about 30 years ago, we've been able to realize why it's so helpful and why it works for so many different conditions. Unlike any other medicine on the face of the earth, it is because we have a system that already produces THC like molecules in our body, and that THC fits into that system. And for many people, can be nourishing. Whereas people who kind of shoot past this limit are going to have to take more and more and more, and they're going to see less and less and less symptom relief in many cases. So if you feel like you come out of this conversation and you're like, I need to back down on my own doses and see how I feel on maybe much lower doses of THC, let's talk about the strategies that you can use to help you decrease your THC consumption. Teaching people that this is a plant medicine that they have to communicate with and pay attention to is a powerful journey. They can use it for the rest of their life. Welcome to our June 2026 science call. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the question, how much THC is too much THC? This is a student call. We meet every couple of months to talk specifically about science. And we meet every month to talk about everything to do with being a cannabis coach and educator. We will have time for Q&A and discussion at the end. This is a highly personal topic for me, and it might be for you as well. Before we do dive in, this is a disclaimer that we try to make every time that we're not healthcare practitioners. We don't have any legal or medical or any of that kind of advice here for you or guidance. We're just trying to share information about what we know after looking at the science. All right. My name is Andrea Maharg. I'm the program director here at the Cannabis Institute, and I have been teaching for a very long time. Cannabis changed my life. It's coming up on 10 years now, where I was in a really deep depression and cannabis pulled me out of it. That led me eventually to the Cannabis Coaching Institute, as it was called at the time, to try to learn how to teach other people about this because it had changed me so much. And I wanted to make sure that I was being factual and ethical and honest and legal and all the things. And I have been doing that work ever since, coaching and educating on this beautiful plant. And this topic, I have to say, I didn't really want to talk about. Like, I didn't really want to dive in because I love THC. As soon as I tried it and it cleared that fog of depression for me, I was in love with this plant. She kept me alive at that point. Like, I wasn't so sure that I was going to make it. And consuming cannabis for the very first time as an adult, it was eye-opening to me, and I've wanted to teach about it and talk about it, but I also really like it. Like, it makes me feel really good. And I read a long time ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, that 30 milligrams is the like kind of what researchers, scientists, medical practitioners say is the upper limit of THC that you should be consuming a day. And at that time, I was consuming way more THC than that, and still living like a functional, healthy, happy life, like doing all of my things. I was really annoyed by that number. And so I've kind of avoided it ever since. This is personal for me because I finally like looked at my own issues with it. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to answer this question. What is the limit? What does the research say? And what to do if you come to this number and you're like, oh, I'm consuming too much. How do we deal with that? Before we dive into any number, I want to remind everybody that this plant in its natural form has never killed anybody yet. And in its natural form, it cannot. So you could take way more than this number I'm going to share with you, and it would never actually kill you due to where the endocannabinoid receptors are in our brain. Now, that doesn't mean that, doing that is a great idea, but we do know that people who are consuming large doses of THC, sometimes thousands of milligrams a day, are using that successfully in cancer fighting protocols specifically. We have one of our favorite grads ever. Her name's JJ. She has now successfully fought two different types of cancers using high dose THC. So the medical uses of THC for cancer specifically, there's not a lot of research on it, but there's a lot of people like JJ out there. And even if that's not what it is, we know that some people seem to require more THC than others. So this number that I give you, this isn't like defining you as a person if you're taking more like I was. Everyone is really different. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that in a little bit. So let's talk about what too much really actually means. Too much is going to be defined in this conversation as when we move along the spectrum or on the dose response curve from symptom relief, like, oh, I'm feeling better. I was feeling really depressed. And now I feel like I want to get out of bed and wash my hair. And we're moving past that into impairment. Anxiety comes up for a lot of people. If you feel your heart rate continuing to go and go, cardiovascular strain, and the development of cannabis use disorder. We are going to talk about cannabis use disorder as a reason to watch how much THC that we're consuming and getting unwanted side effects. Like if cannabis is starting to have some sort of effect on your life in a negative way, then this is what too much is for you. And what we're looking for is called the Goldilocks zone. So the curve that I just drew for you in the air with my finger is called a biphasic dose response curve. And most medications don't work like this. Most medications, if you start with a little bit and it relieves your pain, if you have a little bit more, it'll continue to relieve your pain even more. And if you have more, it'll continue to relieve your pain. And cannabis THC specifically is not like that. So if you take a little bit of THC, you'll start to feel better and you'll continue to feel better with more THC until you kind of meet your sweet spot, or Goldilocks zone. And then if you think like, oh, this amount of THC really helps, I'm going to try more. It can be that you start to feel really poorly, some really bad side effects, and it doesn't actually work as well. Let's look at that a little bit more closely with the example of nausea. So with nausea, we know that cannabis THC specifically can help relieve nausea and vomiting, specifically in people who are going through chemotherapy. That's where a lot of our research comes from. But we know THC is super effective at helping people not feel sick to their stomach. And then what we also know, and you might have experienced yourself, is that when you take too much THC, you get really nauseous and you start to vomit. And that's because at high doses, it's causing the opposite effect. And that same thing actually happens with pain. Low dose THC or lower doses of THC seem to really help with pain perception. But then as you take more THC, it can actually make you feel the pain more, which is not what you want. So THC is unique compared to loads of medications on the market and the way most things kind of work. All right, so low to moderate doses in our conversation here are going to be between 1 and 5 milligrams of THC. This is a really low dose for most people who consume THC. This promotes things like relaxation. It can help with pain. It can help with anxiety at low doses. And at high doses, it can really make you paranoid and anxious. This stimulates appetite. It has a lot of kind of like calming, helpful benefits for your system. And then high dose is for you a different number than it is for me, although we are going to get to the number that the researcher says. If you're starting to feel bad side effects, you've taken too much THC, and on your next dose, you should take less. And I'm still going to hold off on the number for a bit because we need to do some more caveats here, because cannabis is the most dynamic plant medicine on the face of the planet, right? Like it has so many different ways of working in our body. It helps with so many different things. And our bodies are so very different from each other. And in some cases from ourselves, depending on where we are in life. So we're going to talk about a few more things. we see that individuals actually process THC even at different rates. So you and I could both consume the same amount of THC, and because my body processes it more slowly and yours is more quickly, then we don't have the same effects. And this can be affected by so many different things. I'm just going to list a few here. The most important thing that we got to think about is how much experience does the person have using THC? So if you're a brand new user, you're going to process it differently than as somebody who's accustomed to taking it, what's called in the literature a chronic user, which means that you're using about once a day, and how much tolerance you've developed. So some people, even though they use every day, because they keep their dose low or for a variety of factors, their tolerance isn't that affected. And once you've developed tolerance, you need more and more and more all the time to think that you're going to feel the same thing. And we'll get into why that's a think and it doesn't actually happen necessarily. Other things that can affect how THC will affect you is what you've eaten that day. Are you eating on a full stomach, an empty stomach? Did you have some fat with your meal? How much water have you drank that day? For us women, it even matters where we're at in our monthly cycle as to how THC will affect us. Another thing that affects it is how many other cannabinoids or what else are you consuming with it? Are you just taking straight isolate THC? Is it low dose THC that has loads of other cannabinoids in it? Like what else is happening with what you're consuming? That really affects how THC operates in concert with the other plant variables. Your age matters. As you age and your endocannabinoid system ages, your use of THC might change. And if you're suffering from health conditions, it depends on how long you've been suffering. Like, is that a chronic condition? Because for many chronic conditions, your endocannabinoid system is actually really dysregulated. And so you're going to need probably more cannabinoids, especially at the beginning of your treatment, to make a difference there because of how depleted that system is. So the rule here is that there is no rule, okay? Even with these numbers that I'm going to give you. How you consume cannabis really matters as well for a couple of different reasons. When we're talking about oral ingestion, that's when you're having like an edible or an oil or a drink or something that, you know, it's going through your digestive system before the cannabinoids are reaching your brain. You're going to get about 4 to 20% of the cannabinoids that you actually take in, because when it's ingested, takes longer to kick in. For some people, it's as quick as half an hour. And for some people, it's like 2 or 3 hours. Many people have that thing where they consume too much of it. And then that makes the duration longer and the experience so much worse. So people get themselves in trouble with THC edibles, as you might know. And one of the reasons for that is that chemically, when it passes through our digestive system, the delta 9 THC that we have consumed changes into a different molecule. It's called 11-hydroxy THC. It's a smaller molecule. It passes through our blood-brain barrier more easily, and it's more impairing than its cousin delta 9 THC, which you would get if you were inhaling cannabis. So it's actually a little bit of a different beast. As an example, if you were to consume 100 milligram edible, I just did that for easy math here, but please don't make that your starting point. You would actually get maybe 4 to 20 milligrams of THC, of the actual compound that then converts to the other one, into your bloodstream. The good news here is that for many people, if they feel like they're consuming too much THC, especially inhaling, they might be able to take significantly less if they're going to ingest it, because of the reason of you feel more effects from the 11-hydroxy THC. So you might be able to get more bang for your buck out of your THC is the point there. Okay, so the other way that we're going to talk about, there's of course many ways to ingest cannabis, but the other way that we're going to discuss as a counterpoint is inhalation. So here, between 10 and 35% of the cannabinoids that you smoke will actually enter your bloodstream. It's slightly more if you're using something like this PAX vaporizer that I have in the picture here. This big variation is for a couple of reasons. One is that more experienced consumers of inhaled cannabis are way more efficient. So if you've been smoking or vaping cannabis for a long time, you'll actually consume more of your cannabis than somebody who's brand new to it. The other big variable is like, how are you smoking? If you're like, trying to not let any smoke disappear, if it's a windy day, like all of these things affect it. But because this kicks in so quickly, for most people, it's around 4, 5, 10 minutes. You naturally kind of self titrate. People don't let themselves get too out of control with THC until you've kind of hit your tolerance level. And then many people try to put themselves, like in that very euphoric state and find that they can't. You'll get more THC if you're an experienced user, but as a new user, the combination of the new toxins and the THC coming in, they can often take way too much. So good news for them is that feeling will wear off much more quickly than if they had done the same thing with an edible. And as an example, again, so if you had a mid-sized joint, about a half a gram of, let's say, 20% THC, in that half gram joint, you'd have about 100 milligrams of THC. If you were to like somehow combust it and inhale that all in one, one toke kind of thing. But because of how bioavailable it is when we inhale and the lost smoke issues, you receive about 10 to 35 milligrams of THC. So again, for some people, it might make more sense for you to switch to edibles. For most of us, it makes more sense to switch to edibles for a variety of reasons. I think this is my last caveat. The other thing that really matters here is whether you're consuming THC isolate or whole plant cannabis. Isolated cannabinoids, we know, have a much smaller therapeutic window, meaning that it doesn't work as well kind of outside of these guidelines. It takes this much to start working, and here it kind of like peters out a little bit. And there's significantly more side effects if you are using an isolate rather than whole plant cannabis. So again, we know this from studies on dronabinol, which is a synthetic THC. That's all it is, just straight THC in an oil. And that causes impairment, side effects that people don't want to have, right? They're trying to get medicine, even at low doses. If you're taking whole plant cannabis, so that's cannabis that's been, taken off the plant and processed as one into an oil without stripping things out, or if you're inhaling whole plant cannabis, you have a much wider therapeutic window. So your dose kind of ramps up kind of slowly to your Goldilocks zone, like we were showing you. We always advocate for a whole plant medicine. So here we are. How much THC is too much THC? Well, NIDA out of the States recommends that 5 milligrams is the maximum single serving dose. Up here in Canada, our maximum single serving dose is 10 milligrams. And NIDA would say that 5 milligrams will make it so that you're basically side effect free for most people. That's not true for all people. 5 milligrams would probably send Corinne to the moon. I'm not sure. She's really low dose, but that's their recommendation. Here's this study that I read. I think it's from back in 2018 by Catherine McCallum and Ethan Russo, some of our favorite cannabis researchers. And this is the study that says at about 30 milligrams a day, you're going to get diminishing therapeutic returns. You're not going to feel the same symptom relief, and you're going to wander into side effect land. And I was like, oh, that was so long ago. Surely we've learned more since then. And we have learned more since then. And this number that I'm going to show you is specifically for chronic pain patients. 40 milligrams is kind of a global scientific consensus about the upper limit for taking THC on a daily basis. And again, this is specifically for chronic pain patients before side effects start to take over. So that's not that much. Maybe that's just for me, but I know for many cannabis users, that's not a lot, 30 or 40 milligrams a day as the upper limit before we start seeing diminishing returns. And there's something else that comes up in the literature, is this idea of many of us wanting either more symptom relief or more euphoria, whatever it is. And so you take more with THC, and people chase this all the time. And we know that it doesn't help us feel better necessarily. And the other thing it does is it really increases our tolerance. So if you were to take about 5 milligrams, basically they say anywhere under 30 milligrams, but most people I work with around 5 to 10 milligrams, they can continue to take that for a really long time in many cases forever as a maintenance dose, and they don't ever have to take more to relieve their pain or to help with depression or whatever they're taking it for. Whereas people who kind of shoot past this 30 milligram limit are going to have to take more and more and more, and they're going to see less and less and less symptom relief in many cases. And in clinical practices, looking at some of the work of Bonnie Goldstein and Dustin Sulak, it's not a hard and fast rule for them either, but about 15 to 20 milligrams of THC daily, divided up into several smaller doses, keeps people from developing tolerance and maintains long-term symptom control for a lot of their patients. So we know from multitudes of studies that a small dose of THC is often the most effective dose that we can have, especially if we're consuming that dose along with the other plant constituents that it was grown with. The other thing that we set up at the top was about cannabis use disorder. So this is a disorder that's found in approximately 9% of the cannabis using population. I talked about it on a science call a couple of months ago. Most medical cannabis patients would fall under it, and we would all have cannabis use disorder because we rely on this plant to feel symptom relief, to feel better, just like we would rely on a prescription medicine for the same thing. But for many people, this is a thing that impacts their life. Other signs of cannabis use disorder start to come into play, where they're choosing not to do activities with friends and loved ones and instead choosing to use cannabis, for example. So if we're trying to avoid that, there is research that shows that only up to about 70 milligrams total THC per week. So these are using those NETA 5 milligram chunks, but only using up to about 70 per week is strongly predicted that people were going to show up on the cannabis use disorder scale. Maybe they're showing up on the scale because now they're taking daily THC and it's really helping them and it's such a benefit and a medicine. And maybe they're taking daily THC because they're falling into patterns that aren't really actually helpful for them. So if you feel like you come out of this conversation like me and you're like, okay, I've now heard this enough times, like I need to back down on my own doses and see how I feel on maybe much lower doses of THC. Let's talk about the strategies that you can use to help you decrease your THC consumption. The first thing I always recommend to clients is to replace some of their THC with CBD instead. This is particularly helpful for people who are using it for inhalation. If you're trying to stop smoking, loads of THC joints, for example, because CBD itself is actually really helpful for addictions at certain doses. So people still get the feeling of consuming cannabis, by smoking or vaping. They still get the same amount of time that they're going to take because you've just replaced some with CBD, but you are lowering your THC joint. And if you're taking edibles, you can just, instead of taking like a full dropper full of THC oil, maybe you take half of THC oil and you add in some CBD, some CBG, some THCA oil, adding in some other cannabinoids, which actually help that THC work better and have more effects within the body, plus all the effects of the other cannabinoids. Another strategy is to taper down your use by using less, but having the option to use it more often. So if you're wondering if significantly less cannabis can be still as helpful for you with your pain, for example, instead of consuming your full joint, your full bowl, your full vaporizer of cannabis, your full edible, consume a quarter of it. And then let yourself know that if in an hour, let's say, you're still feeling pain, then you could try more. For many people, they'll find that low dose does relieve it. And maybe an hour later, you've kind of forgotten about your pain or you've moved on and you're doing something else. So that way of consuming less, but still having it available. Because if you are still in pain, then smoking a quarter of it isn't going to work, or taking a quarter of your edible. And we've touched on this a couple of times, but making sure that you have like a full spectrum of cannabinoids by adding in different chemovars, different strains of cannabis, that allows you to get kind of like a full range of some of their minor cannabinoids, plus the other plant constituents that help with your experience. Also, switching up your strains more often can help with tolerance as well and allow you to take less THC. So hopefully some of those gave you ideas on how to back down if that's what you would like to do. All right. So we're at the end here. We know now that keeping our daily dose of THC to about 30 to 40 milligrams a day is going to help us hopefully get better symptom relief with less side effects. And that for people who are really trying to avoid cannabis use disorder or becoming dependent on it, consuming even less THC is a great idea. Don't forget that this plant offers way more than THC. And we're finding out really exciting things about some of the other cannabinoids like CBG, like the acidic cannabinoids. And we learned that we can decrease our THC usage while still benefiting from our gorgeous plant that we all love. And hopefully we all remember that everyone's different, and for some of us, every day is different. So give yourself some grace as you are figuring out what works for you. If you loved this, if you're here as a guest and you're like, yeah, I love learning about cannabis, then you're one of us. We're like a bunch of nerds over here. We love learning about this stuff. We offer a Cannabis Coach and Educator certification. We've been training coaches and educators about this plant since 2018. We've trained over 800 people. Some of our graduates are on the call, and a lot of our students are as well. We want you to go out into the world feeling confident that you are speaking legally and ethically and scientifically about this plant, using it as a medicine. You also get the community that we have, the confidence to get out there and speak your piece about this plant and teach other people about it. And share with the world that this plant is beautiful and healthy. We are enrolling for our summer cohort right now. So if you are interested, then check us out at our website. It's cannabisinstitute.co. All right. We are going to move into Q&A and discussion about this. I'd love to hear from you, like what you thought about all of this. So did this hurt anybody else's feelings that 30 milligrams was the limit?
Yeah. So my first thought when I saw them, I was like, wow. I think that it depends upon your pain tolerance. I've got a rod in my back, so that wouldn't touch the rod. I need more. Do you understand? And I think that that's required. So I think, I don't know where that number came from. I don't know why the people would come up with the number. They just said, I think I like 30. That works for me. They all agree. It's definitely required to have more when pain is pain. You feel me?
Yeah, I do feel you. And I wanted to make sure that people didn't feel like weird or ashamed or like a bad person, because this is cannabis, so we have all this stuff mixed up with it. If you need more THC and it is not impacting your life, like you're able to do the things that you want to do and need to do in your life, you're not falling into the other cannabis use disorder criteria, and maybe you could do a little bit less. I don't know. Maybe that's helpful information for you, but I don't want you to feel bad about doing more.
And I told my doctor, yes, I need my sticky icky for my back pain. Mm-hmm. I hope you can appreciate and understand that.
If you look at that call, I posted it. It's about the New York Times. They had all this to say about cannabis, and I was fired up about it. And in that call, we talk about the criteria for cannabis use disorder. And like I said, every single medical patient would be a cannabis use disorder person, just like every single person who takes insulin for their diabetes would be a insulin use disorder person under the same criteria. So thank you for sharing. All right. Hi, Tina.
Hi, thank you so much. This was great. Like I said, I'm a guest. I have a question for you.
Sure.
I know a lot of folks that are now switching to cannabis and not drinking, which is really great. But what I'm wondering is, does THC and the other cannabinoids, do they get processed through the liver like alcohol does as a toxin? So a plant that is natural like that, even though it's getting processed in all of these facilities, it's a better choice than alcohol.
Our first line of defense is using cannabis as a medicine, is not using cannabis that has been through all these processes at different industrial places, getting as close to whole plant, fresh from the plant medicine as you can. For many people, that's inhaling. For many people, that's taking the cannabis buds, the medicinal part of the cannabis itself, and infusing that into food and taking it that way. People make a tea out of it. But no, THC, even when it's processed, is never a toxin because it is not poison like alcohol is. Alcohol is actually poisonous for us, and this is not. In fact, since we discovered that we have an endocannabinoid system about 30 years ago, we've been able to actually realize why it's so helpful and why it works for so many different conditions, unlike any other medicine on the face of the earth. It is because we have a system that already produces THC like molecules in our body. And that THC fits into that system. And for many people can be nourishing because that system can also be depleted by stress, age,
Right.
bad nutrition, etc. And so in every single case, I would preach cannabis over alcohol in every single case. There are lots of less safe ways to use cannabis, and we really advocate against those types of things and teach our students how to find healthy, safe cannabis that can be used as a medicine and also can be used for a fun Saturday night hanging out on the back deck with your friends without the poison. It's not the same thing. We compare them often because they're both impairing, but they are not the same thing.
Got it. I have just one more question, if that's
Yeah, go
okay.
for it.
Yeah. So how do you answer the question when people say, how can smoking anything be healthy for you?
I say that we know that it's not the healthiest way to consume cannabis. People have been smoking cannabis for thousands of years. It's just this past 100 years due to prohibition, we haven't really had so much access to it. So we've been smoking it for thousands of years, which lots of people use to say like, haha, like we're still smoking it. We've been smoking it for thousands of years, mostly and medicinally, not, every day when you come home for work because you want to. And when you're smoking anything, you are doing damage to your lungs. What we do know as a counterpoint is that cannabis is not associated with lung cancer at all, but it's not good for you. It causes bronchitis. It can impact your lungs for sure. So when people say like, how can you say smoking is healthy? I don't say smoking is healthy. If you want the quick hit of inhalation, because it hits so quickly, reduces your pain so quickly, like her sticky ickies, as she called them. If you want that without the toxins and the byproducts that come with lighting something on fire and inhaling it. There was a picture of a vaporizer in that presentation, and it just takes the cannabis flower and it literally heats it up and vaporizes the cannabinoids. And then you inhale that. It looks like smoke, but it's not, and it's not damaging to your lungs. But if you don't want to do that, you can do edibles, you can do creams, you can do suppositories. There's so many different ways of consuming. So yeah, don't smoke. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah. I'm
Appreciate
glad.
it.
Thanks, Tina. Okay. How do we know how much THC we're getting when we vape? It's slightly higher. I think it's like 20 to 45 or 40% of the cannabinoids you get when you dry herb vape specifically. So slightly higher than inhalation. Oh, you mean like milligrams? Okay. So you need to do some math to figure this out. So let's say that vaping THC or vaping cannabis in a dry herb vaporizer, let's say it gives you 40% bioavailability. Okay. So we know we're at 40% of what we take in. Then you have to know how potent your cannabis is itself. So if you know that, that's beautiful. If you don't know it, between 15 to 20% is kind of like standard-ish. So again, we're doing like loads of guessing here. Let's say it's 20%. Okay. So that means that for every 1 gram of cannabis flower that you put into your vaporizer, you're going to have about 200 milligrams total of THC available to be consumed. Most people can't put a whole gram into their vaporizer. So let's say again that we're going to use like half a gram. So now we're down to 100 possible milligrams of THC if you were able to shotgun that thing and take the whole thing. So 40% of that. So you have about 40 milligrams of THC. So if you're packing your half-gram vaporizer 2 or 3 times a day at that 20% THC, you've tripled what the numbers say. And what I keep coming back to after like spending the last few weeks learning about this and thinking about it and diving deep on the research is again and again and again it just says like less is actually more with THC. And I remember learning that so long ago and being like, nah. But that people actually do feel better when they're taking less THC. Again, I'm not taking anybody's sticky ickies away from them. But if you wanted to give it a try, it might be interesting to see if that holds true for you. And if it doesn't, smoke, like do what you want, right? We know how to consume this plant with the most amount of harm reduction possible. So do it that way. It's still a beautiful plant medicine. Don't get butthurt about it. Forget about it. Just forget that I ever said this. Like I forgot about it the first time I learned about it. Okay, do that. Hi, Ben. Welcome.
Hello. Is there a number, kind of where the psychotropic effects are taking place? The threshold under which I'm still in microdosing land?
Microdosing is anything considered up to about 5 milligrams. So true microdosing, when we're starting our clients off, 1 to 2 milligrams. 2 milligrams is too much for some people. I saw it in the chat. Somebody was like, absolutely not. And that's not the experience we want to give people who we're talking to about this plant. So starting them out really low and slow, I tell them all the time, like, I'm going to give you a dose that you probably will not feel. And you're going to be like, why did she give me that? And then you're going to take 2 drops of THC oil the next time. And then the next time you're going to take 3. It might take us a while to get to your ideal dose. Teaching people that this is part of the process and appreciating as you can start to feel this plant working in your body, like the day that you take 4 drops and you're like, oh, I can move much more easily than I could earlier, or I want to get up and do my things. That's a beautiful process for people to really tune into, rather than saying to them at 3.75 milligrams of THC with a spoon of peanut butter at 7 a.m. when you're not on your period, that's the way to go. Like that's not, it doesn't work. So teaching people that this is a plant medicine that they have to communicate with and pay attention to is a powerful journey. They can use it for the rest of their life. If you love learning about cannabis and how and why it works in the body and how to make it work for you so that you can feel better in your day-to-day life, and if you love talking about this plant with everyone you meet and trying to convince people to, give CBD a whirl when they're feeling rough, you are probably already a cannabis coach and educator. And I would like to invite you to check out our upcoming cohort at the Cannabis Institute. We have been teaching people how to help others feel better with the power of cannabis since 2018. We'd love to have you join us. We need so many more people out there in the world who understand how dynamic, how multifaceted, how wonderful and potentially dangerous this plant can be, so that more people have access to it, more people understand it, and more people can feel better with cannabis. Please check out the links below to see what's going on in our class. We hope to see you on the inside in our next cohort of cannabis coaches and educators.